When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will.
Mr. Grush is quite clear that he's not saying it's necessarily extraterrestrial.
Non-human origin.
That he's not saying it's necessarily extraterrestrial.
Call it spacecraft if you will.
That he's not saying it's necessarily extraterrestrial.
Then what are you saying?
Oh, hey, little space monkey.
Non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. We are live once again, and it appears to be that this week is Whistleblower Week. I had some other shows planned, but it appears that everybody is still talking about this story of one David Grush, the newest in a long line of UFO whistleblowers in history. And I thought it would be incredibly important for us to actually take a little bit of a history lesson before we so quickly put our trust in anyone, including the latest UFO whistleblower to hit the scene. Now, we do have some troubling new information. At least it's troubling to me. Recently become the victim of shadow banning on Twitter, verifiably. We have the evidence of that. And this is something that has never, to my knowledge, happened to me before. I have never been shadow banned on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else that I am aware of. And this recently, it would appear that many people that were very critical of this new UFO whistleblower story put out by the Debrief and Ross Coulthart and the people over at News Nation were apparently shadow banned. I'm still looking into it, so I'm going to do a separate story on that depending on what it is that I find. But verifiably, people who were critical of the UFO whistleblower story found themselves suddenly shadow banned. Now, what does that mean? That means that my tweets were removed from people's feeds, including my shows. I tweet out all the shows. It also means that people had trouble finding me on Twitter. And we have the evidence of that. So there is some troubling new information about this so-called UFO whistleblower that we will be sharing with you. But I thought it would be important for us to first take a trip down memory lane. And this is what we'll be doing tonight. I'm going to be providing you with a very brief actually, history of so-called UFO whistleblowers. So we will, of course, begin our journey with Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar rose to prominence in 1989, telling fantastical tales about being a top secret scientist for the government, working on ultra top secret programs at Area 51, and his story involves him being a MIT and Caltech educated physicist with advanced degrees in physics and electronics technology. His education would all turn out to be fake, and there is ample evidence that this man never attended MIT, not the least of which was the fact that his undergraduate degree was actually from something called a degree mill, a place where you just buy a degree. It was called Pacifica University. And these are in the court filings of one of his criminal cases. So Bob Lazar is not now, nor was he ever, a government scientist. Bob Lazar was never actually a scientist, period. You need degrees to be a scientist. He may have been a self-employed, nerd, techno fan, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Lazar claimed to be a physicist and to have worked in that capacity during his tenure at Los Alamos National Labs. Subsequent investigation by Signals Intelligence and others, people got to his supervisors at Los Alamos National Labs. And what they found out was he was never a scientist at Los Alamos National Labs. He was a low-level technician. I've said this before, I'll say it again. He was the kind of guy where if you were a real scientist working at this lab and you spilled coffee on your keyboard, he would come and bring you a new keyboard and hook it up for you. He was a very low-level technician. He did not have the education to be a real scientist. An inquiry into Lazar's position at that facility revealed that his role had been as a technician for a contractor firm, Kirk Meyer. He did not work directly for the lab. He worked for Kirk Meyer. So the lies of Bob Lazar, and this is what we're going to get into tonight, something that I'm extremely passionate about, which is spotting these layers of deception and peeling them back for all of you. Most of these UFO whistleblowers, their stories are built on layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of deception. And Bob Lazar was no different. The man claimed to be a government scientist, but when you start peeling back the layers of deception, you find out he was never a scientist. But one thing he was a convicted, he got convicted for pandering. Bob Lazar ran a whorehouse. There, I said it. And there is an incredible amount of evidence which would point to the fact that Bob Lazar, not only was he never a scientist, he never stepped foot on Area 51. And we know that because a on the record real Area 51 security guard who worked there at the time checked the flight logs. Bob Lazar claimed that he flew in and out of Area 51 on the Janet flights, which is very common for anybody that works on the base. But what we find out when you peel back that layer of deception and talk to somebody who actually worked at the base, had access to the security logs of the Janet flights and the check-in, check-out logs. Apparently, there's two sets of logs, one for getting on the flight, one for getting off the flight, one for checking into Area 51, one for checking out of Area 51. So this on-the-record source was interviewed by a friend of the show here named Victor Caliero. And in that interview, which we aired here in its entirety, you can find it in our archives here, that Area 51 security guard, who we can verify was an Area 51 security guard, had access to everything on the base, worked at the base at the time Bob first came out with his story. He said there's no Bob Lazar in any of these logs. Worse yet for the people selling this story, and that would be one George Knapp, worse yet is that this Area 51 security guard called George Knapp on the telephone, found him at his job at a local television station and said, this guy is a fraud. You may want to be careful telling people he worked at Area 51. I work at Area 51. I've checked all the logs. And he did this right after the second broadcast where Bob revealed his identity. Because in order to get in or out of Area 51 or to get on the Janet flights, you have to use your real name. So no Bob Lazar in any of the logs. He never worked at Area 51 like he claimed. Now, I know people always argue with me, well, he didn't work at Area 51. He worked at S4. Yes, a fictional sub-base of Area 51 that does not exist, period. It doesn't exist. And there have been flyovers. There is Soviet satellite imagery from that era that prove there was never anything off of Lake Papoose as Bob Lazar described. So we've got a fake scientist who was convicted for running a whorehouse. One of the other parts of his story that prove this could never have happened is that Bob Lazar claimed that there was Russian scientists inside Area 51 working on the flying saucer projects, and then there was some kind of breakthrough and they threw the Russian scientists out. This was 1989. It was the height of the Cold War. They would never in a million years, ask any intelligence specialist, ask any Cold War specialist, history specialist, they would never have let adversarial scientists anywhere near Area 51 because that's where they developed all the secret technology that they were using against the Soviet Union. This is another layer of deception. Bob Lazar's story has fallen apart in slow motion. Unfortunately, it's taken decades, right? And we have more and verifiable evidence that Bob Lazar could never have worked at Area 51 or gotten clearance to work on any government project. And that was provided by Signals Intelligence, who did a deep dive into Bob Lazar's wife and found out that Bob Lazar's wife, at the time he claimed to be working on secret projects, was actually a convicted murderer with very, very strong ties to organized crime in the form of the Hells Angels. Additionally, Bob Lazar and his wife declared bankruptcy just 2 years before Bob Lazar claimed to get clearance for the most secret program in human history. Again, a red flag. They do not give people with strong ties to criminal activity clearances. They do not give people with financial problems clearances. That's a security risk. It's a huge security risk. There's so many red flags, but of course, along comes Jeremy Corbell several years ago to, take back the microphone, and he's going to prove Bob Lazar's story is true. And all that Jeremy Corbell proved is that he's very good at doing the lie by omission, because everything that I just told you was available to Jeremy Corbell, or most of it. All of the data or information which would prove that Bob Lazar is not now, nor was he ever a scientist, Jeremy Corbell knew all of this. The information about his education being fake, Jeremy Corbell knew all of this. The fact that he wasn't a real scientist, Jeremy Corbell knew all of this. The fact that he worked as a technician at Los Alamos Labs, because Los Alamos Labs did not hire physicists as subcontractors through Kirk Meyer. Kirk Meyer only handled low-level staff, like technicians, There are so many red flags to Bob Lazar's story, but that hasn't stopped the UFO profiteering whores. George Knapp sold this story for 30 years, still won't admit that Bob Lazar is a fraud. Jeremy pretended that an FBI raid on Bob Lazar's business had something to do with flying saucer fuel. We talked to the FBI agents. They laughed at Jeremy Corbell using that to sell a documentary. We talked to the local sheriff in the town where Bob Lazar's business is. He laughed that Jeremy Corbell would use that FBI raid to sell a story about flying saucers. Had nothing to do with that. It was part of a murder investigation, apparently, or allegedly. Bob Lazar was selling dangerous chemicals that somebody may have ordered and did something to their wife with. And by the way, that case is still ongoing. I think I haven't checked in several years on it. We'll do that and bring you an update on that case. So the Bob Lazar mythology, it completely and totally falls apart under scrutiny. And let's remember that a lot of this mythology that the subsequent so-called UFO whistleblowers would talk about was created by Bob Lazar. Oh, we're in possession of alien technology. Oh, we're in possession of alien bodies. We're trying to back engineer these alien spaceships. A lot of that originated in 1989 from Bob Lazar. And I know that because I was a nerdy kid. Big surprise. And I was into like building things and model rockets and electronics and computers and science and technology. And I have followed the Bob Lazar story since it originally broke. And I'm one of the people that got scammed by Bob Lazar because as a young man, I sent money off and bought his original VHS tape. Bob Lazar, Government Bible, I believe it was called. And it was all about Bob Lazar explaining his experience working on the spaceship and explaining how the spaceship works. Of course, if you talk to any physicist, it's sci-fi gobbledygook nonsense that he talks about. And I know people always go, oh, he predicted element 115. Element 115 was predicted in chemistry books from the 1970s. I have one. I know that. We can look at the periodic table and go, okay, we're up to this number element. Eventually, we'll synthesize the next one and the next one and the next one. I think they're up to element 116 or 17 now. So he didn't predict anything. And isn't it interesting that after 30 years, there's not one corroborating witness that also worked on that top secret program with Bob that could say, yeah, he's telling the truth. I saw the aliens too, or I saw the flying saucers too. And also, I always loved this part of the story. Bob Lazar and Gene Huff, his business partner, went to John Lear's house shortly before he came out with his story. And there they made some kind of a deal, Gene Huff did, to do a real estate appraisal. And in exchange, John Lear gave Gene Huff all of his Billy Meyer material. Look at the Billy Meyer beam ships and look at Bob Lazar's sport model. Looks like the same exact craft to me. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it was a carefully constructed narrative from a bankrupt loser who needed money desperately. And these stories that he never tried to cash in, that you don't know the story. He cashed in every chance he got, selling these tapes out of the back of science magazines. He got a deal with Tester's Model Corporation. He's been paid, I've been told, for that anniversary of his story. They got him to a conference and paid him somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000 for one speaking engagement. He got I'm told he got a six-figure deal for the book deal through TTSA and Tom DeLonge's sister, right? He's been making money off of this story the whole time. The difference is that he never wanted the little pennies. He didn't work all the UFO conferences. He didn't want to do that, apparently, I guess. That's not a lot of money. He was trying to get the big money, like a Hollywood movie deal. They tried to sell his movie to Hollywood several times, him and his business partner, Gene Huff. And unfortunately, nothing ever panned out for Bob Lazar. And you know what else never panned out? Any proof or evidence of his actual claims. There is none. There is no proof or evidence of Bob Lazar's claim. None. Period. Full stop. There's just no proof. There's him telling a story. And people telling a story will become a theme in our history lesson here as we proceed through the history of these whistleblowers. Now, and I also want to make sure that I just state this. There's a lot more of these UFO whistleblowers than we'll be covering tonight. But I decided to focus on the most famous or most well-known so-called UFO whistleblowers, except in one case, which is Pete Peterson. But I decided to include him because I'm intimately familiar with him and his fake stories and his fake background and everything else. But the next whistleblower on our UFO whistleblower, and remember, there's a lot of similarities, and we're going to go over the similarities here of these cases after we go through their claims and what happened with their situation. What I can tell you is that all of the UFO whistleblowers that we are talking about, all their stories fell apart over time. Their stories fell apart. There was no smoking gun evidence, let alone any evidence, if you ask me. But it depends on your standards of evidence. If your standards of evidence include stories and you call that testimony, then okay, they had evidence. But if we're talking about real verifiable proof of their claims, no. And in most or many of the cases of these people, their claims fall apart over time, right? We have a lot of examples of this, and we're going to get through the examples of it. 1 second here. Let me get okay. So next on our list is a man named Philip Corso. And Philip Corso is extremely important because right now, because of this whistleblower, David Grush, we have people saying, oh, we've never had a guy with this level of clearance. Yes, we have. Yes, we have. We had Philip Corso. Pardon me. And I have to say that I'm not an expert in who has more classified access than other people, but I would venture to guess that Mr. Corso actually had higher levels of top secret clearance or access to more programs than this Mr. Grush did. And Philip Corso is an interesting case, and it was one that I truly wanted to believe. Of course, Philip Corso has a famous book called The Day After Roswell. And of course, I bought it when it came out, and I read it, and I was convinced that this guy was telling the truth. I was convinced that this guy was on the level because he was so highly decorated, Philip Corso was, and highly respected, Philip Corso was. So Philip Corso was an American Army officer, and he served in the Army from 1942 to 1963. He ended his Army career with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. And Corso published The Day After Roswell in 1997. I remember buying the book when it came out. I remember the hype around this book was huge. And we were told that we were finally getting a disclosure. It's coming. This high-ranking military officer, he had access to everything, and he's finally going to spill the beans. And the book, The Day After Roswell, was about his alleged involvement in the research of extraterrestrial or alien technology that was all recovered from the 1947 Roswell incident. Philip Corso was a guest on Art Bell, where he spoke about his Roswell story in 1997. Less than a year after Philip Corso published his book, he died of a heart attack, actually. But Philip Corso had incredibly impeccable and interesting credentials. Philip Corso had great credentials. And he worked for the Foreign Technology Division, which a lot of people have theorized, if you find an alien spaceship crash landed somewhere, where else are you going to take it? You take it to the Foreign Technology Division. Any technology that they come into contact with, especially if it's adversarial technology, it goes to the Foreign Technology Division. And Mr. Corso was heavily involved in running that area of the military. So at the time, I sincerely remember everybody at the time thinking, this is it. We're finally going to get disclosure. This guy's the real deal. He really was in the Army, and you could check all of his bona fides, and everything checks out. And that was true. Philip Corso truly was an Army officer, highly experienced. He worked in foreign technology for a time, and it gets more impressive because this man was something of a war hero. In 1945, Corso arranged for the safe passage of 10,000 Jewish World War II refugees out of Rome to the British Mandate of Palestine. He was a personal emissary to Giovanni Battista Montini at the Vatican and later Pope Paul VI during the period when the Nazi rat lines were most active. So this man was a war hero, World War II war hero. He saved 10,000 Jewish people from the death camps, right? Then it gets better because during the Korean War, Corso performed intelligence duties under General Douglas MacArthur. This man was right at the middle of history, right? He was the chief of special projects branch of the intelligence division. One of his duties was to keep track of enemy prisoners of war camps in North Korea. And there was some controversy because he claimed that hundreds of POWs were left behind. He testified in 1992 to Congress. So here's a man who's testifying before Congress on war issues and intelligence issues. This guy was so respected and decorated and you know, a lot like our new guy, David Grush, right? Wow, he's high ranking. Everybody really respects him. He's been involved in all these different projects. But when people say we've never had a guy like this before, you don't know the history. Because also, Philip Corso, talk about an impressive resume. Philip Corso was on the staff of President Eisenhower's National Security Council for 4 years, from 1953 to 1957. He was also the chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in Army Research and Development, working under General Arthur Trudeau. So when people say, oh, we've never had a guy that we could verify all of his credentials before, and his credentials are extremely impressive, Philip Corso's were more impressive, if you ask me. This guy worked for a president. He worked at the Foreign Technology Division. So, of course, he had high levels of classification and all of that stuff. And so his book, the day after Roswell comes out, and Corso claimed that he had access to alien artifacts from Roswell, essentially, that somehow the devices were just kind of left in a filing cabinet somehow. And Corso said that a covert group within the government, most people would say Majestic 12, was assembled under the first director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And one of its tasks was to collect alien technology, of course. And somehow Corso gets put in charge of that. And according to Corso, they were trying to reverse engineer these Roswell artifacts. And those reverse engineering efforts and him giving it to certain companies and organizations within the United States really was a catalyst for our modern technological age, because Corso claimed that him giving these Roswell artifacts to all of these titans of industry somehow was responsible for the development of lasers, fiber optics, integrated circuit chips, and Kevlar material, among other things. So essentially, Corso's claim was that he gave Roswell technology to these different companies, and then they try to back engineer it, and they created all of these things, including integrated circuits. But there's huge problems with Corso's story. And I think more than any other of these whistleblower story, Corso's story is a cautionary tale when we look to the latest whistleblower, David Grush. And that is because you cannot impeach Philip Corso's history, his record, and his credentials. Those are impeccable. It may very well be that David Grush's history and credentials is impeccable and can't be impeached. But Corso's story completely and totally fell apart after the book was published. And the way that happened is that people who were responsible for the development of the technologies that he was claiming came from Roswell technology all started coming forward. People who worked on developing Kevlar came forward and disputed. No, we were well on our way to developing this, or we have proof it was developed before Corso claimed to give them the so-called Roswell artifacts that they would use to create those technologies. The same goes for lasers. The same goes for integrated circuits. The same goes for fiber optics. So incredibly, it would appear that Corso's story was entirely fictional and could be picked apart with facts, evidence, and history. And it was. But to this day, some people still cling to the belief that Philip Corso somehow was the catalyst for our modern technological age, because he gave that Roswell crash debris to various companies who developed all of our technology that we're so fond of today. I don't believe Philip Corso's account. I did at one time, but I was a very young man when I read that book, very gullible. Later, I got to study computer science and the whole history of computer science. And the fact that this guy claimed that integrated circuits came from Roswell technology, you can look it up. You can look it up. These things were well on their way to being developed, or already developed, or in prototype stages before he claimed that he gave these companies and these individuals pieces of Roswell technology. Many people have said, and I agree that maybe it's rumors or speculation, but many people have said that Philip Corso got interested in UFOs. He saw all the money people were making, and he wanted to leave something to his children of a financial nature. And to this day, that book is still sold, and his son still supports his account of things and works UFO conventions, or at least he did several years ago. Haven't heard from him in many years. But the book is still for sale on Amazon. It's still a good seller, believe it or not. And all of the money goes to his family. So maybe those people who say that were correct. This was one big money grab. At the end of his life, he had a very prestigious set of credentials, and he decided to cash them in on a UFO book that was largely filled with complete and total factual inaccuracies. And by the way, he only co-wrote the book. The book was a mess. The book was a mess. It was like misspellings, and nobody proofread it. There was complete and total factual historical inaccuracies all throughout the book. The book was a mess. But that didn't stop all kinds of UFO profiteering whores from making money perpetuating this hoax. And that's what I'm calling it. Philip Corso, the day after Roswell, it's a hoax, friends. It never happened. Now, we get to one of my favorite so-called whistleblowers, and that is one Clifford Stone. Clifford Stone is another person who had real military credentials, but not very impressive ones. Because Philip Corso, Clifford Stone, in the world of UFO research, Clifford Stone is kind of known as the Walter Mitty of UFOs. But I'm going to read you first his official biography from Gaia TV. Yeah, he was on Gaia TV. That's kind of how you know he was a fraud. But in his Gaia TV biography, they say, in the world of UFO research, the name of retired Army Sergeant Clifford Stone is nearly a legend. I don't really think so, but it is what it is. And by the way, just for a visual aid, I'll search for Clifford Stone images and share that here. And he wrote a book, Clifford Stone, Eyes Only. 1 second here. Let me, yeah. So, and this is his book, Eyes Only. And where have we heard this story before, right? The story of Clifford Stone and UFO crash retrievals. And boy, look who did the foreword for that, Robert Salas, right? I know you people think he's a whistleblower too. Think again. He's a UFO profiteering. All right, I'm not going to say it. All right, so Clifford Stone is an interesting case. And this is one of them that, again, when I first heard his story, I really did want to believe him. But there's a lot of red flags to Clifford Stone's story. So let's get to his biography. He's a legend in the world of UFO research, decorated Vietnam combat veteran who served 22 years. Turns out he wasn't a combat veteran, at least not really. So Stone claims that he led a double life from the late 1960s to his retirement in 1990, while officially assigned to the NBC, Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Retrieval and Abatement Detail. He asserts that he also served on top-secret UFO crash retrieval missions where he had physical contact with downed ET craft and even interactions with captured non-human life forms. The official NBC team assigned allegedly served as a cover for those highly secretive and compartmentalized operations over a period of nearly 40 years. So he claims he's working on crash retrieval stuff for 40 years. Stone has amassed one of the largest private collections of authentic government documents, clearly establishing the hard reality of the UFO phenomenon. No, he had a lot of fake documents that he would tote around too, and we can prove that. Okay, so Clifford Stone was a sergeant in the Army. And while being a sergeant in the Army, he claims that he was in some of the most top secret projects ever. And he also claimed that he was part of Project Moondust, which the timelines don't match up. Something's not right. So what you get with Clifford Stone, if you hear his earliest interviews, those are the most convincing. He sounds incredibly genuine. And people verified that he was a sergeant in the Army, so he must be telling the truth. No, think again. Clifford Stone was a complete and total pathological liar, and we can prove that because people looked into his actual real military history. Remember, he said that he was included in working all these top secret projects. He claims to be was a combat veteran of the Vietnam War. In order to be a combat veteran, generally, you have to be in combat. And apparently, when you dig into Mr. Clifford Stone's actual military records, what you find out is that he was never in combat. Period. Full stop. So right in his own biography, he's lying. That's a real problem. Further, Mr. Clifford Stone was never, ever a part of this so-called NBC team. He never worked in any capacity. While in the Army, he never worked in any capacity of nuclear, biological, or chemical retrieval and abatement detail. He never did that. Never. So that's a second red flag. Right in his biography, he lies again. And again, researchers have really dug into this man's military history. People who would know better, people like Kevin Randall. And by the way, there's an extremely funny story. Kevin Randall was going to interview this man. And by the time Kevin Randall was going to interview him, Clifford Stone had been out of the military for 10 years. Clifford Stone showed up to the interview with Kevin Randall in full dress uniform, and he had been out of the military for 10 years. Now, ask any military man. If you've been out of the military for 10 years, you don't go walking around with your old uniform on, unless there's some kind of a veteran special event or something. But you don't show up to an interview with a researcher or an author or a journalist in a uniform that you haven't officially worn for 10 years. That could be considered another red flag. Clifford Stone, to me, is one of the Walter Mitty's of the UFO world. He, like I said, though, in his early interviews, he comes across very, very believable. You want to believe him. But the truth about Mr. Clifford Stone is that despite his various claims of being involved in all kinds of top secret Army projects and seeing aliens, and oh, by the way, he also had superpowers. He could telepathically communicate with the aliens that crash landed. That's why he got the job. No, the reality of Clifford Stone is kind of sad, because Clifford Stone spent his entire career in the United States Army being a clerk. He went on no missions. He was not in combat. Clifford Stone was a clerk typist for the large part of his military career. He was a secretary in the Army. He did not recover flying saucers. He did not interface with aliens in the military. He was a typist. Now, Clifford Stone passed away several years ago, but I once got to speak with him in person, and I confronted Clifford Stone with paperwork and documents showing that he was a clerk typist, that he was never in combat, that he never worked in any capacity with nuclear or biological anything. And Clifford Stone got incredibly angry with me, started yelling and screaming at me and telling me, that's the cover story that MJ12 want you to believe, Stephen, because I'm a whistleblower. And okay, Mr. Stone. And it should be noted also that besides claims of his superpowers, Clifford Stone's stories got more and more grandiose as time went on. His original story was somewhat believable. I worked on a secret program. If a UFO went down, we were notified, we would show up, we would cordon off the area, all the things you've heard. Cordon off the area, right? We get the Army flatbeds in there and we tarp it, cover it. We take it back to, the base to be taken elsewhere after we recover it. And occasionally we encounter biological entities, living or dead. He claims both. If dead, they collect them as specimens and take them back to the base and all this. And that was sort of his original story, which is kind of like, believe it or not, it's pretty grounded compared to the stories that he would tell later. Because later, he suffered from UFO disease. He worked all the UFO conferences. This man lived in Roswell, New Mexico, and he was always at the Roswell Museum for all the special events, and he spoke at them about him recovering crashes and aliens and saving aliens. He even helped an alien escape that was captured by the United States government once. That was one of his later stories. And later, as time went on, people tired of his original, more grounded version of his story. So he just kept expanding on it. And eventually, Clifford Stone would start talking about 57 different alien races. He would tell people that he traveled via wormholes. And he also claimed to be involved in all the UFO major cases. And these were the Tehran case, the Belgian Triangles, the Phoenix Lights, the Bentwaters case. So he says he was part of a crash retrieval team, but none of those famous UFO incidents involve any kind of crash or retrieval efforts. So none of this made any sense, right? None of those famous UFO cases involved a crash, and none of them at all were under the jurisdiction of the United States Army. So how would he have been involved in those cases? The truth is, many people proved that he wasn't at all involved in any of these cases. So as time went on, Clifford Stone's stories became more and more grandiose. And when I last checked in on him several years ago before he died, Clifford Stone was telling everyone that he was the reincarnated Messiah and that he had been getting more and more psychic superpowers. As time went on, he got more and more grandiose. He started talking about his past lives, and he astrally traveled to Jupiter. Like it got sad. It got sad. The more and more this man needed stories to tell, the more grand and ridiculous this man's stories got. So there's another case of and he was called a UFO whistleblower. And by the way, one second. It's important to point out that all three of these whistleblowers that we've been through so far, Bob Lazar, Philip Corso, and Clifford Stone, all of them were cash cows for the UFO scene. What do I mean? Everybody globbed onto them and their stories and made money with and from them. We can see examples of this. So when we get into these UFO whistleblowers, it's not just them that's making gobs and gobs of money in some cases, book deals, TV deals, documentary deals, all kinds of deals. It's the people around them. It's the UFO convention organizers that hire them to come and talk. It's the journalists or so-called journalists selling their story. It's the co-authors of their books and their book publishers. It's people promoting their agenda, which is to claim to be a UFO whistleblower. Now, the next one is one of my favorites, and that would be David Wilcock's stupidest source ever. And that's a man named Pete Peterson. And one second. We covered this man, Pete Peterson, in extensive detail. So what I can tell you about Pete Peterson as we go further down our timeline of so-called UFO whistleblowers is that David Wilcock claimed that Pete Peterson had the highest levels of top secret access ever in the government. He was the government's chief go-to scientist, a man that Ronald Reagan called Mr. Do because he could do anything. Yeah, sounds hokey, doesn't it? Well, David Wilcock is the worst researcher on planet Earth. So among Pete Peterson's claims were that Pete Peterson was a science and technology advisor for Ronald Reagan and helped develop Star Wars technology. Yeah. Also, this man claimed that he worked for the Russian equivalent of NASA, the Russian space, organization. And he also claimed that he spent some time in Russia doing humanitarian work, and he was awarded the Russian Order of Lenin Award, which is like our Congressional Medal of Honor. Pete Peterson also claimed that he was an early computer pioneer, and he beat Apple, Commodore, Tandy, Atari, and everyone else to market with the first alphanumeric computer keyboard back in the day. And remember, I've got a background in computer science, and I love old computers and computer history. So as soon as I heard that, I thought, why have I never heard of him then? We did an extensive investigation into Pete Peterson's claims, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some of his other claims. Primarily, he claimed that he had all these patents as well, you know, and again, that he had this computer company, which coincidentally was called Cyberdyne Systems, which you may recognize from the Terminator movies. Yeah, that's how hokey this was. David Wilcock would later claim that the people who wrote the Terminator movie stole their ideas from Pete Peterson. And Pete Peterson also talked about developing incredible AI technology, 40-core integrated circuit technology, computer processor technology that had 40 cores that was decades ahead of Intel and Apple and IBM and everybody else and Motorola's chipsets. You know, so his claims were absolutely ridiculous to me because I have a background in computer science, but I wanted to be sure. So we went to every computer history museum that we could find, probably 5 or 6 of them. And we sent his biography along with his claims of his beating Apple, IBM, Commodore, everybody to market, right? We sent them to all these computer museums, vintage computer museums. And all of them came back and said, this man never existed. We can't find any record of him, his company, his computer. His background is completely and totally fictional. So, and by the way, I knew that, but I wanted confirmation of it. We also talked to early computer pioneer, a real one named Dave Haney, who worked for Commodore International, developing the Amiga computer system. I got to tell you, it was a pleasure to talk to him because I'm a huge fan of Amiga computers from back in the day. That's what really got me excited about science and technology. First computer that can multitask, first computer with digital sound, first computer with a GUI operating system. It was just worlds ahead. It was such an amazing computer. So Dave Haney and I sat down for a talk, and Dave Haney brought up some excellent point. If this man was really telling the truth about being an early computer pioneer, there would be some mention of him, his company, the computers that he was developing and selling. And by the way, he claimed that every university in America bought that computer. So we checked with 10 universities that specialize in computer science. None of them ever heard of this man. This man's entire biography, it appears, was completely and totally fabricated. But according to David Wilcock and the people who were around him helping him sell himself as a UFO whistleblower, he was a UFO whistleblower and an alien whistleblower. And boy, his stories were ridiculous. They were about the secret space program, and he developed space technology and spaceships, and he developed super advanced AI and all these things, and it all falls apart. By the way, remember, he mentioned that he worked for the Russian equivalent of NASA. We checked with a Russian space historian. This man probably never even was in Russia. He never worked for the Russian space anything. He claimed he won the Russian Order of Lenin Award. It turns out, no, he didn't, because there is a list of every person that has ever received the Russian Order of Lenin Award, just like there's a list of every person that ever received the Congressional Medal of Honor. So we checked with a Russian historian. No mention of Pete Peterson or his legal name, Gary Peterson. So his entire biography completely and totally fell apart right before my eyes, just doing a few days of research. By the way, also his claim of working for Ronald Reagan, he never worked for Ronald Reagan, period. Full stop. Never worked for Ronald Reagan. Never. So in some cases, these whistleblowers' background are fake. In the case of Bob Lazar, fake education, fake pimp scientist. He's not a real scientist. Some of these UFO whistleblowers you can destroy just based on their fake background and claims about their background, their education, their work history. Pete Peterson is one of those frauds. It's like somebody just wrote him a biography to be impressive as a science and technology guy. And by the way, his education, Pete Peterson's education, was also completely and totally fake. He did not have any of the degrees that he claimed. We checked and checked again and checked again. His education was fake. But Pete Peterson would get television show deals. David Wilcock would write whole books about the stories that Pete Peterson told him as a so-called UFO whistleblower. Pete Peterson's entire biography was completely and totally fabricated and fake. This is important that we recognize that in the history of UFO whistleblowers, what we get is people's stories falling apart after they come out. So, of course, if their backgrounds are fake, it takes some time for people to research their claims. I researched Pete Peterson's claims perhaps years after he originally made them. I just wasn't aware of him and his claims. And something did not sit well with me with David Wilcock. David Wilcock's calling this guy his #1 whistleblower. This is David Wilcock's #1 whistleblower, a guy with a completely and totally fake education. And by the way, Pete Peterson would be involved in several scams, including a stock pump and dump scam, where they used his fake history as an early computer pioneer to pump up the price of a startup company that had just gained the capability to sell stock. They pumped up the stock price, and then apparently or allegedly, all the people that were principals of the company, including Pete Peterson, once the stock price was all pumped up by him coming in, claiming, oh, I'm an early computer pioneer, I'm going to be on the board of directors here. Everybody started investing in that company. Oh, we got an early computer pioneer here. He's like a Steve Jobs. The stock price goes up, everybody sells off their stock, and then the stock plummets and the whole company goes out of business. He was involved in pump and dump scams. He was a techno scammer. Then David Wilcock ran a GoFundMe scam for him, claiming that the government had seized his house and they were throwing all his belongings outside, and there was bulldozers outside, and the police were ransacking his house, and they even took his mother's ashes, the urn with his mother's ashes, and they were destroying all of his papers and his important documents. So David Wilcock runs a GoFundMe scam for him. They collect something like $60,000, but David Wilcock forgets to tell everybody. And by the way, they claimed he was a UFO whistleblower in the GoFundMe scam. David Wilcock forgets to tell everybody that this man's entire biography is fictional. He's not a UFO whistleblower. He's not a government insider. He never worked for the government. He's a complete and total fraud. But David Wilcock and him do this GoFundMe scam, raise $60,000. We checked into that. What really happened is that this man's home was foreclosed on years prior to the GoFundMe scam. And it was already sheriff saled, which means no amount of money would have gotten him his home back. But the bank gave him literally years to get his stuff out of the home. And we talked to somebody who was at the site while the cleaning company, or more like a clean out company, was cleaning out that property, and it was a hoarding nightmare mess. And Pete Peterson's home that was foreclosed on, which actually he had no legal right to anyway, because it was his girlfriend's home, not his home. His name wasn't on the deed when it was foreclosed on and sold at sheriff's auction. It turns out David Wilcock and this guy claimed there was millions of dollars worth of scientific equipment in that home. According to the people cleaning out the home, that home was a hoarding rat's nest nightmare mess. And it was filled with, get this, dead cats and bottles of piss. There were saved bottles of urine, human urine, all over the house. So not only was this guy a complete and total fraud, he was some kind of wackadoo that was saving his own piss and filled up an entire house full of bottles of piss. There was no expensive scientific equipment in the home. There was no secret documents. And by the way, David Wilcock and him lied to everybody. There was no bulldozers. There was no police. The police never even entered the home. I talked to them. Pete Peterson's entire story falls apart. He's not a UFO whistleblower. He was a mentally sick, I believe he was a mentally sick, ill man. But even his death did not stop David Wilcock from trying to profit from this guy. David Wilcock profited from this fake whistleblower for years. Even after his death, David Wilcock, still to this day, David Wilcock makes videos and said, Pete Peterson, my number one whistleblower, told me the guy's a complete and total fraud. Who cares what he told you? The guy's saving bottles of piss and he's got dead cats all over his house. There's no secret technology in his house. There's dead cats and bottles of pee. Gross. But even after he died, David Wilcock is still profiting from him. He has not milked his number one fake fraud source enough, because in one monetized YouTube video, David Wilcock claimed that Pete Peterson was murdered by an accidental injection at the nursing home where he died. We called the nurses. We checked into that nursing home. None of that ever happened. If there's an accidental death due to an injection that was given in error, there's a whole investigation. There was no investigation. The guy just died of natural causes. He was old as dirt, right? Didn't stop David Wilcock from trying to milk him for one more fake story that he could make money from. And so Pete Peterson, UFO government insider whistleblower, complete and total fraud. Are we getting the theme here now, right? These whistleblowers are not what they appear to be. Next, we get to Corey Goode, which after Pete Peterson, Corey Goode became David Wilcock's number one whistleblower. And I don't want to waste too much time on Corey Goode because everybody knows that guy's a joke. But Corey Goode rose to prominence after hooking up with David Wilcock and becoming his partner in a television show. Well, streaming. Everybody always says TV show. Some streaming service show on Gaia TV network. And Gaia TV, a lot of people forget this, but before Lou Elizondo, the big guy that everybody was talking about that dominated every conversation in UFO land for years was Corey Goode. Essentially, Corey Goode told a fantastical story about being kidnapped as a child from school and trained in a secret program because he was an intuitive empath. Yeah, he had superpowers. Eventually, Corey Goode recovered memories of being part of a secret space program. And it got wilder and wilder from there. Corey Goode went on this television show and told stories of his Buck Rogers science fiction fantasy time travel adventures for literally, I think, 5 years. Interestingly, Corey Goode never provided a single shred of evidence, but he told people he time traveled, he met multiple species of aliens in space, he went to the moon, he went to Mars, and he built a base on Mars. He talked to the inner Earth anchovy people, Anchar, and they were future Earth species that somehow contacted him. And oh, it gets really ridiculous the longer that you listen to Corey Goode, the more ridiculous his stories got, because he constantly needed material to sell stupid people for the Gaia television show. And eventually he left Gaia TV because they started bringing in other so-called whistleblowers like Emery Smith, who's another fraud that didn't make this list but is a fake UFO whistleblower. So Corey Goode leaves Gaia TV. Then he creates these documentaries with David Wilcock, and all of that is the subject of all of these lawsuits that we've talked about. But interestingly, Corey Goode, he made the most fantastical claims you've ever heard. He's going on secret space missions. He's Earth's ambassador. The aliens picked him out of everybody else to represent the human race in some galactic garbage federation. It sounds like the guy was watching too much Star Trek. And I have noticed that he stole a lot of stories, in my opinion, from other even lesser known science fiction fantasy shows like Stargate SG-1 and Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine. And yeah. And interestingly, also, there is some episodes of Star Trek that you can tell he stole in my opinion. You can tell he took his stories from them. Somebody just pointed me out that one of Corey Goode's stories directly corresponds to a series of 3 episodes on Star Trek Enterprise, which is a lesser known Star Trek show, but it's still out there. Interestingly, also, all of Corey Goode's stories were in a book, essentially. Most of his stories, the 20 and Back and the Recovered Memories and Going to Mars and all this stuff, was in a free ebook called The Mars Chronicles, I believe, that was out several years before Corey Goode. And nothing that Corey Goode ever said was original. It was like cobbled together from all over conspiracy land. So Corey Goode's stories were worthless because they did not include a single shred of any evidence. If you're going to tell people you're going to space, this guy said spaceships landed in his backyard to take him to a secret moon base on the moon. And nobody else saw that but him. And of course, there was the stuff about the moon. Corey Goode claimed that he built Mars bases while he was living on Mars. It gets more and more stupid and ridiculous as time goes on. But what happened is Corey Goode sued all of his business partners in those documentaries, claiming they were embezzling from him. And he took control of these accounts, and then he sued the people, and nobody's gotten paid in 2 years. And Corey Goode's keeping all the money, allegedly. It's a big mess. But during those court cases, Corey Goode was forced to give depositions, and he had to admit, and he did admit under oath, that he's never even been to space. So some alien UFO whistleblower, right? He's a secret space program whistleblower, and he's telling us the truth about the secret space program. The guy spent years of his life telling secret space stories of him being a secret astronaut. And anyway, under oath, he had to admit that he'd never been to Mars, he'd never been to the moon, he's never been to space. Here's one of my favorites, where he says he never said that he lived on Mars. He never said that he's been to Mars. But then we see that he did say those things.
Never lived on Mars. No, never said that.
You never said that you lived on Mars?
No.
They would ship, everything was prefabricated. Everything had been put together on Earth, designed to go together like a puzzle by numbers. And I helped actually to build out an outpost on Mars. And we used a lot of the local materials on the surface after they had built below ground. And it was very much like this. It was much lower tech than you would expect.
Never lived on Mars. No, never said that.
You never said that you lived on Mars?
No.
It gets extremely laughable. He also said that spaceships landed in his backyard. His neighbors, nobody saw the spaceships. So here is another so-called whistleblower who spent, I always think it's interesting too to see how long does it take from the time a whistleblower, so-called whistleblower, first comes out until their entire story is shot to crap, right? Sometimes it takes years, and the whole time that their story is being investigated and scrutinized and debunked, they're making lots of money. Corey Goode has made millions of dollars in some people's estimates, honestly, including mine. He made $750,000 gross from one online course. That's in the court deposition. Hundreds of thousands of dollars on these documentaries, perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars from Gaia TV. They redacted how much they paid him to be a so-called performer for them, right? And why is the so-called whistleblower getting TV show deals or streaming service deals or documentary deals and book deals? There's always a deal attached to the UFO whistleblower. And I predict something right now. This new whistleblower is going to be in either a television show or a documentary. Guarantee it. I absolutely guarantee that this so-called new whistleblower, David Grush, is going to be in documentaries, television shows, something. So we've come to Corey Goode. When it comes to Corey Goode, he is laughable. And I'm not sure if it's true, but I've heard rumors that he went to Contact in the Desert and he was the laughing stock of that whole convention. Like people were just whispering and pointing and like, there's the guy who just got caught. He punked himself. And the interesting part of Corey Goode is that he brought his own downfall on himself. Pride, they say, does come before the fall. And this guy was so arrogant, he starts suing everybody, blaming everybody for his problems. And because he started suing all his business partners, he was forced to give these depositions in which we get the stunning revelation that this so-called secret space program insider who spent 8 years of his life telling his stories about going to space never went to space physically. He might have went there astrally, though. It's totally, Corey Goode is a joke, totally ridiculous, right? But important history lesson for not just believing people's claims. Next, we get, in our timeline of UFO whistleblowers, we get to Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo shot to instant fame because of a New York Times article written by the same people who wrote this article about the new guy, right? Same people, Leslie Kean and Blumenthal. Leslie Kane, all right? I'll say it right. The lady spells her name Kean. That's Keen to me. But no, she wants people to say Kane because she wants to be different. Okay, Leslie Kane and Blumenthal wrote the original New York Times article calling Lou Elizondo a Pentagon whistleblower. And they said in that article that he ran a $22 million UFO program for the Pentagon, and he was its director. It turns out that none of that is true. And the very same people that are selling this story in 2016, 2017 sold us the Lou Elizondo story. And now anybody with a brain can go through that original article and see that it is filled with complete and total lies, factual inaccuracies. And by the way, the primary source of that article about Lou Elizondo was Lou Elizondo. So who lied to those journalists? One can only assume, because the program that Mr. Elizondo claimed to be a part of didn't actually ever officially exist. And remember, we talked about the layers of deception. There was a lot of layers of deception behind the Lou Elizondo story. He purposefully conflated two different things, OSAP and ATIP. And why would he do that? Why would he purposefully mislead journalists? And you could call it misleading them, or you could call it lying to them. He said he was the director of a $22 million program, but it turns out the $22 million was for a program years before his involvement. And they spent all that money, and then the program went under. No more funding. But Lou Elizondo created an imaginary, I'm assuming, an imaginary Pentagon program in his head in the land of make-believe that he was the director of, that had all this funding, but it didn't have any funding. So the same people who were bringing us this story brought us a completely and totally factually inaccurate fake story. Lou Elizondo is a fake story. And I don't care how many times he gets the GQ Hero of the Year award. He never ran any Pentagon UFO program. He was not the director of, he was the director of the land of make-believe UFO program. And everybody called Lou Elizondo a whistleblower. And it took years, but his entire story came crashing down. The Pentagon denied that he ran a program several times. Oh, but he did get a letter from Harry Reid saying that he did, but that guy's dead. And I don't trust him because he was part of the original scam to give $22 million to his longtime campaign contributor, Bob Bigelow, so that they could study the ranch that Bob Bigelow owned. And Leslie Kean purposefully misled everyone in that story because she left out all the stuff about, Bob Bigelow and the 22 million and where it really went. It went to study poltergeists and demons and werewolves and dog-headed people, man. And dino beavers, dude. Lou Elizondo had nothing to do with that $22 million. He should not have misled journalists. Did he mislead them, or did they help him carefully craft his story to sell a narrative? Because that's what we were sold. Lou Elizondo is not a UFO whistleblower because all he brought us was 3 videos, and those videos are worthless. They are worthless garbage. I remember, too, that Lou Elizondo, of course, was involved in TTSA, which many people seem to think was a techno scam now. Hindsight is always 20/20, but they raised a few $1 million and they promised everybody a spaceship, and nobody knows where the spaceship is. But Tom DeLonge and his sister made a lot of money. I'm not sure how much Lou Elizondo made. And there was also the History Channel television show deal. Remember, there's always a deal. You always get some kind of deal if you're going to be a UFO whistleblower. And when people say, well, we've never had a guy like this David Grush with all these impressive credentials. No, Lou Elizondo's credentials all checked out. His background, the fact that he worked for the Pentagon in intelligence capacity, that checked out. His credentials were good. But he misled everyone, including the American public and the UFO community. Later, Mr. Elizondo would even admit that he was sent into the UFO community to use his counterintelligence skills. And I find that incredibly disturbing, that he actually just basically admitted it. He basically just admitted it. I was a counterintelligence guy, and I was sent into the UFO community. And this is a clip from that.
It's about truth. It's about disclosure. It's about transparency. And if it means that I don't get my day in the spotlight, then that's okay, because it's not about that. It never was about that. I didn't leave the Department of Defense because I wanted my day in the spotlight. I left the Department of Defense, ironically enough, to finish the very mission they gave me in the first place. I didn't ask for it. I'm not a UFO guy. I'm not a ufologist. I never have been. I never will be. I'm a counterterrorism and counterespionage guy. I do counterintelligence, counterinsurgencies. That's what I do. And it just so happens that in 2008, I was asked to apply those same skill sets into the UFO community. But I'm not a UFO guy. And so for me, it's all about the truth. Whether I'm hunting a terrorist or a spy or a UFO, the bottom line is the truth is the truth. I'm a counterterrorism and counterespionage guy. I do counterintelligence, counterinsurgencies. That's what I do. And it just so happens that in 2008, I was asked to apply those same skill sets into the UFO community.
Yeah. Who asked him to deploy his counter-espionage and counterintelligence skills into the UFO community? We may never know. Was Lou Elizondo a real whistleblower? Well, you'd have to come with some evidence. And Lou Elizondo has been caught like pushing garbage, fake documents, or not fake documents, but documents that were like garbage, right? He brought us 3 videos that have been largely debunked as nothing extraordinary. They weren't what he claimed they were. Remember the Go Fast? Oh, this thing's really booking. Turns out that was fake. It was going 40 miles an hour, right? He brought us nothing, but he sure took a lot, because he took money with TTSA from the UFO community. He took money to be in this History Channel documentary series, which, by the way, regardless of how I feel about Elizondo, I think that was the worst UFO show I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot of pretty hokey bad UFO shows. It was basically Lou and his friends walking around repeating the same stuff that was in the New York Times original article for, episode upon episode upon. It was garbage. So he's been a taker, right? Now he tried to start a lot of different for-profit companies, including Skyfort with Sean Cahill, another UFO profiteering huckster friend of his. And he's not a whistleblower because he didn't do the things that he claimed. He claimed that he was the director of a $22 million official Pentagon UFO program. Didn't exist except in the land of make-believe. So But I think it's awesome. For forever and a day, I will give Lou Elizondo credit. He's the director of the UFO program in the land of make-believe, and he always will be. I don't care what he does. You know, he did a lot of good things for disclosure. No, he didn't. You're stupid if you believe that. He filled his pocket with every UFO dollar he can, and then he went running out of here when his whole story came crashing down. And that brings us to today. Lou Elizondo was the talk of the town for years now, right? But now, through the lens of time, we can see who and what Lou Elizondo really was. In my opinion, he was not a whistleblower. He was never a whistleblower. He was an opportunist who perhaps, while working at his boring regular day job at a desk inside the Pentagon, looked into some UFO stuff, found some videos, somehow got him out of the Pentagon. That's a whole story in and of itself, right? Those videos were never intended for public release, at least to my knowledge, but they were. And this man took these videos, somehow got them declassified, but not really declassified for internal use only, used by the government, labeling them balloons, drones, etc. So then somehow those 3 videos get covertly spirited out of the Pentagon to awaiting Christopher Mellon in the parking lot. So Lou Elizondo is the one who declassified them for internal use only. And then somehow those videos get put in the hands of Christopher Mellon, who's waiting in the Pentagon parking lot for them. And then those 3 videos end up at TTSA, where they tell everybody they're going to bring about disclosure, invest in our company. We're going to build a spaceship with a revolutionary power source. It's going to change the world. They built nothing. They took everybody's money. I'm still waiting for somebody that gave them money to tell me how they made out on their investment. How did that work out for you? Did you get anything back, or did they just keep all your money and you never saw a dime? I'd like to know. Contact me if you were an original TTSA investor at truthseekershow@gmail.com. And here's where things get troubling. There are substantial, apparently, ties between Mr. Lou Elizondo and this new whistleblower, David Grush. Brian Bender, who was one of the original journalists who covered Lou's story, and later, I believe, became a critic of Lou Elizondo, claims that Lou Elizondo groomed this latest whistleblower for several years. That's very troubling, because if you got one guy who claimed to be a whistleblower that wasn't, right, and his whole story comes crashing down, now all of a sudden, oh, we've got a new whistleblower for you. And he has close associations or ties to Lou Elizondo, as well as many other people that you may be familiar with, like Dr. Gary Nolan, who he's going on trips to Canada with to talk to Canadian Parliament members. We covered that exclusive story here. See our previous coverage of that. He's connected to a lot of different people. And the person vouching for this man, who said that he is unimpeachable, has direct ties to Hal Puthoff, who was also involved in TTSA. So it would appear that this person is involved with all the people that brought us the TTSA garbage techno scam. That is very, very troubling. That, to me, should be a huge red flag. Oh, this guy's in with all the people who brought us the TTSA lies and the Lou Elizondo fake ATIP lies. And the apparently the director of the UFO program in the land of make-believe, Lou Elizondo, is directly tied to this guy, the new whistleblower. And that's very, very troubling to me. So David Grush is just the latest, my friends, in a long line of so-called UFO whistleblowers. And I wanted to take a moment, of course, here to try to be, I suppose, try to be diplomatic about something. many of you true believers, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with being like that, but many of you true believers are very angry and upset with me for my coverage of this new whistleblower. I've had people telling me things like, Stephen, we haven't had anything this good in years. Just let us have this one, sit it out, this and that. No, I can't and I won't. I'm sorry. And some of these true believers do not know the history that I have laid out for you tonight of these so-called UFO whistleblowers. Now, I want to be the first to say that I hope I'm wrong about this David Grush, and I hope we get the proof of alien technology and bodies next week or next month. And I, for one, would celebrate that. However, we have just gone over some history of UFO whistleblowers. We've gone over Bob Lazar, Philip Corso, Clifford Stone, Pete Peterson, Corey Goode, and Lou Elizondo. And we can talk for a moment about the similarities. Here are the similarities. Every one of those people sought to, and indeed did, make lots of money by claiming to be a so-called UFO whistleblower. All of them made some pretty fantastical claims, and none of them ever proved their fantastical claims. So we have only, by the way, presented to you a brief history tonight of 6 so-called UFO whistleblowers. The 6 most famous, I believe, except for Pete Peterson, but I wanted to include him because I'm intimately knowledgeable of him. 5 of the most famous so-called UFO whistleblowers. All 5 and 6, if you count Pete Peterson, were not what they pretended to be. They pushed forth a narrative, a story about them that they were a whistleblower. And all 6 of them, their stories fell apart. It took time. It took research and dedication of people that were really interested in the real truth, not the manufactured, built upon layers and layers of deception truth that they're selling, but the real truth. But in each of these cases of these 6 so-called whistleblowers before Dave Grush, their stories fell apart. They never proved their original claims. They never provided any smoking gun proof or evidence of alien technology, alien crash retrievals, alien bodies, or back engineering. Full stop. Done. All 6 of them claimed all these things, and they never proved it. Bob Lazar's had 30 plus years to prove his claims. All that we have, all Bob Lazar really proved is that every once in a while he likes to come back to the UFO world to get a shot of money, right? And on it goes. We've got these 6 whistleblowers who have produced documentaries, films, books, television shows. In Lou Elizondo's cases, thousands of monetized interviews on YouTube, right? And there's no evidence. There's no proof of their claims. All 6 of them, so-called UFO whistleblowers that came before this David Grush, all their stories fell apart in time. All their stories were not what they pretended them to actually be. So when people get upset with me for being too cynical or critical or skeptical, I've been here through all 6 of those people. I've been on the fence on some of them that I desperately wanted to believe were telling me the truth. And all 6 of them all did the same thing. Overpromise, they underdelivered, and then comes the inevitable big letdown when their stories come crashing down. I should specify, I never believed a thing Corey Goode said, but I followed him because I thought it was funny that this guy told secret space stories for years with no evidence and was making huge amounts of money. So now we get to one of the other similarities. They all overpromise, they all underdeliver, and none of them ever come through with the evidence that they originally promised that they will have, or that they do have, or that they could get, or that will come out soon. It's always kick the can, chase that UFO carrot. But the proof, the evidence, they never come through. Never. And it should also be noted that there's at least 10 more. I made a list of 16. But for the purposes of time, I decided to focus just on these tonight. I can do another show with another 10 of these so-called UFO whistleblowers, all of which talked about alien crash retrievals, flying saucers being back engineered, recovery of exotic technologies, and back engineering efforts to create weapon systems out of these things and this advanced technology, alien bodies, either alive or dead, that were recovered. All 16 on the list. I've only shared 6 of them with you tonight, but all 16 on my list of so-called whistleblowers, insiders, none of them ever deliver. They promise, but they don't deliver. And by the way, while they're promising you that eventually they'll deliver, they are all filling their pockets with every dollar from you dumb people they can. Well, not dumb people, maybe gullible people, maybe vulnerable people who desperately want to believe them. Look, I'm one of you on that list of 6. There's a lot of those guys. I desperately wanted to believe that this was true, desperately. But through the lens of time and the wisdom of actually learning how to research and investigate things on my own, I learned that these people are not who they claim to be. They were all, that's another similarity. They all use layers of deception to carefully create an illusion of them being somebody important. I'm sorry, Lou Elizondo is not now, nor was he ever important, period. Full stop. I don't care. Say what you're going to say. He sat at a desk in the Pentagon. That's what he did. He was a desk jockey. All of these people use layers of deception to create a narrative of them as some sort of disclosure savior, insider, whistleblower. But then they overpromise. They fill their pockets with every UFO dollar they can find the whole time that they're running this thing, right? After they first come out, you get those book deals, documentary deals, TV show deals. Fill your pockets. Live speaking engagements at conferences. Sign me up. I'll talk for thousands of dollars for an hour. Sure. Get that UFO money. Put it right in my pocket here. I'll tell these guys about the aliens. Sure, I will. Right? And they all play this game where, some things I can't talk about. That's too top secret. And it's just, I'm certain that many of them borrow from each other. Is Dave Grush borrowing from UFO whistleblowers of the past? Well, I don't know, but many of his so-called claims are exactly the same as Bob Lazar's from 1989. And by the way, there are stories of alien and UFO and crash retrievals and all this other stuff that go back decades. In the 60s, people started this stuff and saying this stuff. And the people from the 60s still haven't proven their claims. You know, it's 2023, you know, we're 60 plus years into people making these same exact claims, but never proving them. But that doesn't stop them. Not having evidence and not proving anything doesn't stop them from filling up their pockets with as many UFO dollars as they can. It's like a sickness to these guys. And one thing that I have experienced or seen myself is a great deal of greed. These guys are all greedy for every UFO dollar they could get. I think because they know that they have a limited time frame in which to work the grift before it comes crashing down and there's no more money available. Look at Corey Goode. He screwed up good, and his entire, story comes crashing down because he admitted he'd never been to space. And now, what's he going to do? How are you going to get a real job? What have you been doing? They're going to ask you in an interview. Well, I've been telling secret space stories for 10 years on the internet and telling people I went to space. it's ridiculous. We're going to take a moment to thank everybody for the super chats. This is not the end of the presentation, however, so don't go anywhere because I have some new startling information about this latest whistleblower, Dave Grush. You're going to want to hear this. I'll just add Rick Doty. Great show idea. I agree, John Chow. And thank you very much for the kindness, generosity, and support of the show. We want to thank Real Steel Rumblehead. Says, what are your true feelings for Bigfoot beliefs on Bigfoot and UFOs? I'm a huge fan of Bigfoot. Ask anybody that's ever been to my cabin. I got little Bigfoot things around. I got a Bigfoot face on my door of my cabin. I love Sasquatch and Bigfoot. But do I believe that there is a real living, breathing, biological primate creature out in the woods? No. It won't stop me from looking for him, though. And on UFOs, you know, I've been down this rabbit hole for decades now, and I'm still no closer to the truth. But if I had to guess, most of me believes that most of the things that, especially the things that are strange that people see or can't explain, are secret government. I believe that these things were aliens, but years of research has changed my opinion substantially to thinking that these are top secret government projects or secret technologies. But thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Real Steel Rumblehead says, I am the next door neighbor to David Adair. He lives in a double wide in Black Mountain, North Carolina. He's a brilliant scientific story spinner, but like L. Ron Hubbard, has a brilliant mind misdirected. Yeah, you know what, Real Steel Rumblehead, and thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. I did one show on him. People are still commenting on it and arguing with me. I think that guy is a fantastic storyteller, but he has no evidence of any of his claims. Estimate of the situation is here with the kind of generous $10. Says macro shot of a line of stuff being snorted off a book through a $100 bill revealing David Wilcock on the cover. The Ascension Mysteries, a channeling by David Wilcock. Yeah, I think that's how he does his channeling too. And we want to thank Banana for a kind and generous 99-cent super sticker. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. And we're going to be getting to this startling new revelation about the new UFO whistleblower, which is extremely troubling if you ask me. We're almost through here. We'll get to the end of the chat. We have Chase Davenport with a kind and generous $9.99. Steve just saw this video released from Vegas Police Body Cam and 911 call saying a 9-foot creatures in the backyard right after cops saw the thing fly from the sky just before. Oh, you got to send me that video. Send me that video, Chase Davenport. And thank you, longtime show supporter, for your kindness, generosity, and support. We have Popular Front Libertarian of Bougainville with a kind and generous £3 super sticker. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. And all right, we are all caught up here. So now we're going to get into the startling new information that I found on David Grush, the latest UFO whistleblower, who is telling fantastical stories of alien technology. One second. All right, I can't do this right now. People are sending me some messages about something I shared earlier. So we're going to talk about this new revelation, which actually I'd love to take the credit for, but it wasn't me. It was UFO Info Ops, and you can follow them on Twitter. It's at UFO_info_ops, OPS. I'm going to say that one more time because it's really extremely worth a follow. UFO _info_ops. So UFO Info Ops with the underscore between UFO and info. Realize something very, very troubling today, and we're going to share this with you. 1 second. Let me share my screen. Now, in the original picture of David Grush, he was pictured with what I believe is called a shadow box, where people put their patches, their medals, and things like that in a box with a black background. Then they usually display it in their home or whatever. It's sort of a memento of your military service. So here is Mr. Grush pictured with his shadow box. UFO Info Ops caught this. One of the patches in his history here is for something called Special Technical Operations. And this is where things get extremely troubling to me. Not to be too conspiratorial, but remember, I was just recently shadow banned out of nowhere the moment I started being critical of this man and his claims. And so was Stephen Greenstreet and many others that were critical of this man and his claims. Suddenly, we come out and we're critical of him, or we're urging people be cautious before they believe this man. We're getting shadow banned on Twitter. But after this, some things kind of fall into place and kind of make sense now to me. So the Special Technical Operations was set up during the Cold War at the highest level military focal point for all matters relating to what is called offensive information warfare. STOD is a covert action broker for the Joint Staff. Unlike other offices in the Pentagon that merely push a lot of paper, it is also charged with providing direct military support to operational missions of the CIA and the NSA. Ooh, so now we're into the alphabet soup agencies, right? And of responding to requests for assistance from the National Security Council. Each U.S. regional command, such as the South Central Command responsible for Iraq, has its own Special Technical Operations Division. J33, which is what this man, David Grush, was a part of, controls the Special Technical Operations Center within the Pentagon. The center is the most secure facility within the U.S. military. Dozens of special access or black programs are monitored at the center. These include the United States' own hacking activities, strategic psychological concealment and deception operations, and directed energy warfare. The latter includes special weapons and capabilities such as high-powered microwave weapons that could be used to disable enemy communications, computing, and the production and distribution of electricity. But what is most troubling to me is apparently this man has ties to the part of the government or the part of the armed forces here, an intelligence community, which is in charge of offensive information warfare. And where have I heard this before? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make it bigger for you guys to see. So UFO Info Ops found this, discovered this. So I can't take credit for that, but I can take credit for finding a clear, I wanted to be sure that was really the patch. That's really the patch. So this man was part of that unit. Verifiably 100%, David Grush was part of the Special Technical Operations. And I got to tell you, a part of me is not surprised here. And why am I not surprised? Because, my friends, this is not the first time that someone from the intelligence community who was specially trained and maybe responsible for information warfare suddenly infiltrated the UFO community with fantastic stories about aliens and UFOs. The person before David Grush who did that was someone named Anjali or Anjali. And you may be familiar with our previous coverage of her. Anjali also had impeccable credentials. So all you people saying, oh, this is the first time we've ever had somebody with impeccable credentials like this. No, it's not. Because Anjali came forward with fantastical fairy tales about going in a cave and into an alien base and meeting all these different aliens. And she was going to go mount an expedition to go back to the base. Oh, that was another whistleblower, Anjali. Her whole story fell apart, right? Another so-called whistleblower. But Anjali was, like David Grush, a member of the United States intelligence community. Anjali worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. And do you know what she did for them? Anjali was an information warfare specialist. And that just happened a few years ago. Anjali infiltrating the UFO community with, she was an intelligence community member. She infiltrates the UFO community with fantastical stories about aliens and UFOs, right? And she also happened to be in United States Defense Intelligence Agency. And what did she do for them? She was an information warfare specialist. That's what she did for them. That was just a few years ago. And I commented on that. Why is an information warfare specialist member or former member of the intelligence community suddenly infiltrating the UFO community with fantastical stories about aliens and UFOs and a secret mountain base, and she met all these aliens? Why is an information warfare specialist, former intelligence community member, suddenly thrusting herself into the spotlight telling stories of aliens and UFOs? She was an information warfare specialist. And now we get the stunning revelation that our new whistleblower, UFO whistleblower, David Grush, apparently, well, here's where it gets a little, here's where I want to be fair. He's got the patch. Somebody correctly pointed out he could have been just logistics and support, not actually doing information warfare or responsible for information. I don't know. This gets dicey, but verifiably 100% now we have another former intelligence community member who was trained in and perhaps responsible for information warfare, who is also thrusting himself into the spotlight in the UFO community and telling fantastical tales of aliens, UFOs, and crash retrievals, and alien bodies, and intact recovered craft, and back engineering efforts. This is the second time, friends, in just a few short years that a former intelligence community member, by the way, they say you're never former. You're always an intelligence community member, but it is what it is. This is the second time in just a few short years that a intelligence community member who was trained or responsible for information warfare for the United States government thrust themselves into the spotlight in the UFO community and started telling fantastical tales of aliens and UFOs. I am going to the Pentagon myself. I want to know from the government, why are information warfare specialists infiltrating the UFO community, telling stories of aliens and UFOs? Is that a coincidence that now we've got two, not one, two information warfare specialists have now verifiably infiltrated the UFO community and are telling fantastical stories of aliens and UFOs? Now, in the case of Anjali, her entire story came crashing down, but that took a while, took months to research her story. I'm proud to say that we're largely responsible for everybody knowing that Anjali was full of shit and her entire story was fake. We, along with wonderful researchers, most notably Charlie Weiser and James A. Conrad, located, against all odds, it was like an impossible mission, but we found Anjali's so-called witnesses to her alien experience event, and we interviewed them. They all said she was full of shit and none of that happened. There's no mountain, there's no or there's a mountain, there's no tunnel. There was no tunnel. She claimed she went in a tunnel at this guy's house and went into an alien base. There's no tunnel. It didn't exist. It was from the land of make-believe, kind of like Lou Elizondo's imaginary UFO program that he was the director of. That was also from the land of make-believe. But what I find incredibly troubling here is that now we have verifiable evidence that within the last few years, we've got not one, but two members of the intelligence community of the United States of America who have come into the UFO community and are telling fantastical tales of aliens and UFOs, completely unbelievable stuff. And they also both just happen. It's just a coincidence that they both specialized in information warfare for the intelligence community. In this case, for the CIA and the NSA. In Anjali's case, for the DIA. So we've got the DIA, the CIA, and the NSA all covered, information warfare specialists coming into the UFO community to tell us stories about aliens. I don't want to get too conspiratorial. And I notice I've been saying that a lot lately, and I apologize. But something is not right here. For two of them, we caught two of them coming into the UFO community now. And I am one of the people that was blowing the whistle, pardon the pun, on what I thought was a CIA psyop when Lou Elizondo came out. And by the way, I'm entitled to my opinion. In my opinion, the whole Lou Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, Gary Nolan, Tom DeLonge, Christopher Mellon, TTSA, it was all intelligence people or people from the black budget world or the black world. It was all intelligence people. And at the time, maybe I was a little more conspiratorial and willing to express that. But at the time I said, this TTSA thing, it looks like a CIA psyop to me. Why isn't there so many CIA people suddenly running into the UFO community telling us they're going to bring us disclosure and they're going to tell us the truth about those aliens? By the way, they never did. They never delivered any goods, but they certainly controlled the narrative for years, didn't they? And that's what a perception management project is. You want to control everyone's perceptions with a certain narrative. And now it would appear, at least to me, that something strange is going on here, because we've got two verified former United States government information warfare people ingratiating themselves, some would say infiltrating the UFO community, telling us all that they're going to bring us disclosure. Since 2016, how many intelligence people have come into the UFO community? Think about it. A lot. And in the case of Anjali and this man, David Grush, we've got ties to information warfare here, probably training in information warfare. Who knows? This story keeps getting stranger. And we do have some additional other information. There was an interview that Mr. Grush gave to I don't know if it's a newspaper or what. It was from France, though. And we did get the answer of some of our questions, because apparently David Grush was asked some question. The interviewer says non-human objects, and he says, I wasn't certain of their non-human origin until I was briefed on the analysis carried out by members of these programs on these recovered vehicles. What could the origin of these objects be if they weren't human? And David Grush says, and I did not know this, his degree is in physics. And he says the mechanical and experimental data shows that it's not human. I don't know what data would show it's not human, but okay. He says it could be extraterrestrials, or it could be something else coming from other dimensions as described by quantum physics. I haven't seen enough data to say it's one thing instead of the other. The US government must have more information, which is interesting. So now we have an answer. Remember, it's non-human. Well, then it's aliens? Well, I'm not saying it's aliens. It's non-human. Apparently, Mr. Grush is not sure whether these so-called recovered craft are of alien or extraterrestrial origin, or if they come from other dimensions as described by quantum mechanics. And interesting. And remember, now we've got a lot of inconsistencies. Here's another hallmark of a UFO researcher. The longer the grift goes on, the more inconsistencies start popping up. There seems to be a lot of confusion over whether this man saw anything with his own eyes. According to Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal, he didn't see anything with his own eyes. He was told things and saw documents, right? They're not even sure if he saw pictures. There's a whole debate. Did he see pictures or not see pictures? In this interview, it says, did you see any exotic material with your own eyes? And David Grush says, I've seen some very interesting things, but I'm not authorized to talk about it publicly at the moment. I don't have the approval. So that's a huge inconsistency. I thought he didn't see anything with his own eyes, and it was just that people told him things. According to this interview from France, he did see things, interesting things, but he's not authorized to talk about it. The story is unraveling, in my opinion. If you can't decide whether you saw things with your own eyes or not, that's a problem. That's a real problem, right? And then we've got more inconsistencies because the Ross Coulthard is saying that he saw pictures. Other people involved with selling the story are saying he didn't see any pictures. That why can't they get the story straight between the three of them? It's a real problem. And according to this, David Grush says, I'm still bound by my confidentiality agreement with the U.S. government, and I can't discuss information that's still classified. So I could speak publicly in general terms, but details of material recoveries are very limited until they are declassified. But again, the government would not have approved him to talk about this stuff if he was going to be talking about classified projects. So the projects that he's describing, by definition, can't be classified, or he wouldn't be. This whole thing, right? Here's where it gets interesting. Interviewer, you state in your complaint that you suffered reprisals after alerting the Department of Defense Inspector General in 2021. What is this about? David Grush says, quote, they tried to attack my security clearance. They made allegations of misconduct against me, things of that nature. To protect the ongoing investigation on my behalf, I can't give too many details. I think in a few months, I'll be able to. So he claims that people tried to attack his security clearance and made allegations of misconduct against him. Could that be why this man was retired at age 36? Most people don't retire at age 36. Could there have been some disciplinary actions in his future that he may have been trying to avoid? Anything's possible. I think in fairness, we have to wait to see the exact reason for his separation from his government job. But I have a feeling that when we learn why he left his government job, it's not going to look good for his story, right? It may not paint him as the hero that he is portraying himself to be. So, 1 second here. I missed one here. Thank you. Real Steel Rumblehead says, the Pentagon is spreading news of UFOs. I find that very suspicious, like you have been hinting upon. Wonder what's up with that. Well, I'm going to the Pentagon, to Susan Goff, and I want to know why I'm going to ask directly, why are two information warfare specialists coming into the UFO community talking about aliens? Let's see what they say. I mean, not like they're going to go, oh, because it's a PSYOP, Stephen. There's a PSYOP going on, a perception management operation for one reason or another. And why, I have long, and by the way, thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support, Real Steel Rumblehead. I have long believed that actually, there is a substantial amount of evidence that can prove that the United States government actively encouraged stories of aliens and UFOs as cover for their black projects. They did it for the U-2 spy plane. They did it for the SR-71 Blackbird. They did it for the stealth aircraft and more. They did it in the case of the Benowitz case. They were testing top secret drone technology that man was seeing. They sent a disinformation agent in to convince that man it was aliens, and he did such a good job convincing that guy about the aliens, Richard Doty did, that man went literally crazy. Paul Benowitz did. So I have long thought that they encourage stories of aliens and UFOs as classic magician's misdirection. Look over here for the aliens and the UFOs. Don't look over here at our stealth blimps that are over every major city in America right now. Don't look for those stealth blimps. And whatever you do, don't start asking questions about advanced propulsion systems at Lockheed Martin at the Skunk Works right now. It could very well be that this is classic misdirection and this is a perception management project. Who knows, but I do find it incredibly interesting and somewhat troubling that we can verifiably prove right now that there have been two members of the United States former military, and then intelligence officers who were trained or responsible for information warfare for the United States government that are suddenly here in the UFO community telling us that they're going to tell us the truth about the aliens. I think that this is a real problem, right? Jenny Lee, could be. So we're going to take some comments and questions from you guys in the live chat, but this will more or less conclude my presentation for this evening. I want to thank you all for joining me. What a great attendance we had again tonight. Jenny Lee says, trying to confuse the public before the big mother load is exposed. Yeah, it could be. And John Griffin says, aliens need homes too, Baker. Yeah, B. Baker says he's trying for the brave whistleblower like Elizondo did. Yeah, and by the way, we can verifiably now prove that this man, David Grush, has verifiable ties through at least 1 degree of separation to Hal Puthoff. He has direct ties, apparently, to Eric Davis. He has direct ties to Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. Apparently, Lou Elizondo called him a friend and colleague, so he has direct ties to Lou Elizondo. Is this not troubling that this man is connected to all these UFO wackadoos? I think so. And I think that it's certainly, like, you know, let's do a thought experiment. If this guy had no ties to any of the people I just mentioned, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, Gary Nolan, Lou Elizondo, Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp. Oh, and let's not forget Stephen Greer. Apparently he has ties to all these people. Stephen Greer, Lou Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, Gary Nolan. Apparently he has ties to all of these UFO wackadoos. And I say that as a term of endearment. I love UFO wackadoos. I consider myself a UFO wackadoo. But let's do a thought experiment. Would this man be perceived by you to be more credible if he did not have those associations with those people, or less credible? In other words, does the fact that he's in with all these UFO wackadoos make him more credible or less credible? It makes him incredibly less credible to me. It means that he's in the club. It's a big club. And we've heard from Brian Bender and apparently others. I heard from one source that I'll just say is close to the matter, who told me that Lou Elizondo groomed this guy and got him ready for his media appearances, right? Maybe he did the same thing to this guy that he did to, Jeremy from UAPX, Osiris, we're going to take your vehicle and we're going to get a TV show deal and you're going to be a hero, right? Who knows what this man was told? But I'm starting to feel sorry for him, because if it turns out that this man was, manipulated, deceived, and sort of encouraged to do this by those people I mentioned, Stephen Greer, Lou Elizondo, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, Hal Puthoff, and Eric Davis, and Gary Nolan, that means this guy already knows 7 big UFO people who have all been involved in selling fake UFO stories before. And let's not forget Ross Coulthard has been caught selling fake UFO stories. And Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal have been caught selling completely, totally, factually inaccurate story to the New York Times. So that's 7, 8, 9. He knows 10 people all involved in the UFO world, all of which have been caught selling fake stories. Or let's just say being involved in the grift, right? He knows 10 of them already. He just quit his job in April, and he just come out June 5th, right? But we know he was in Canada the week of May 15th talking to Canadian Parliament members. So I don't think that him knowing all of those people or having any association with all those people at all makes him credible. I think that shows he's just a UFO nutter like the rest of those people I mentioned. And maybe he has a problem with, cognitive bias. And also, it should be noted that it's funny, Stephen Greer claimed that he met with this man and provided him with information and mentored him. Stephen Greer claimed that, and then David Grush put out a statement claiming that that wasn't true and nobody mentored him, and here's where it gets interesting. He said, "Don't use my name to further your own agenda, Stephen Greer." And just today, Stephen Greer posted that again, that he mentored him. And so who's telling the truth? Stephen Greer is a pathological liar. Remember, that's the guy that briefed every sitting UFO president since Ronald Reagan. And he goes on secret missions with Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top fame to see alien medical technology. And he was offered $5 billion to stop talking about UFOs, and people on his staff got murdered because they were talking about UFO. It's so ridiculous. That guy's so ridiculous. If I had to choose one of them that's telling the truth, I would say that Greer's full of crap and he's just trying to hitch his wagon to this big story everybody's talking about. But let me know what you think in the comments. Does this guy knowing all these people and having associations with them make him more credible as a so-called whistleblower, or not at all credible because he knows them? To me, him knowing all those people is a huge red flag, because, and I will freely admit that this is speculation, what if it's those 10 people that are feeding him the stories about the UFOs and the aliens and the secret projects? What if it's those 10 people giving him documents? Greer's been known to give people fake UFO documents that he claims were from the U.S. government that turned out to be completely and totally fake. Greer's such a super genius UFO expert, he once gave a completely and totally fake so-called classified document to a decorated admiral. So what if this guy is being manipulated by all these people? What if they're Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis are the people telling him about these crash retrieval programs? Hal Puthoff's a Scientologist and a wackadoo that believed Uri Geller had real superpowers, wasted tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars studying Uri Geller. Uri Geller used magic tricks. There, I said it. And I can say that with some degree of confidence. So it is what it is. This is our brief history of UFO whistleblowers, leading up to some startling revelations about the newest whistleblower, Mr. Dave Grush. So we'll take some comments and questions. Greer's basically talked about my mentor science for almost 20 years. Interesting. It's a big club of grifters, and we're not in it. You are correct, Kevin Gerhardt. All right. Taxpayer says Greer is kicking. Saw some of his latest videos. His fans think he is God. He's the God of lies. I'll give him that. That dude lies. And you know how you know Greer's lying? His mouth is moving. He is so full of shit. That guy waddles when he walks, taxpayer. I think another liar from a long list. Yeah, and we'll you know what, a good way to end the presentation is to ask the audience. We can ask you, I'll put the graphic up here so that we have a visual aid, because we have been through quite a journey of UFO whistleblowers this evening. We have been through Bob Lazar, Philip Corso, Clifford Stone, Pete Peterson, Corey Goode, Lou Elizondo, and now Dave Grush. So what do you guys in the audience think? Is Dave Grush going to be like these other six and just fill his pockets with UFO dollars and never deliver the evidence that he's promising he has? Remember, June 5th, he claimed that he had all this information. He had all this evidence, documents and proof, oral testimonies, names, locations, dates, times, apparently this guy knows where the aliens are being kept, right? Great. So what do we think? Is Dave Grush going to deliver? Is he going to be the first UFO whistleblower in history that's not a fraud and a liar? Let me know what you think in the comments. Here is the people we went through once again. Bob Lazar, Phil Corso, Clifford Stone, Pete Peterson, Corey Goode, Lou Elizondo, all whistleblowers, insiders, right? Disclosure advocates. They were going to bring us disclosure. All they brought us was a lot of fantastical fairy tales and no evidence. So we'll take some more comments and questions here. What is MUFON's official statement? I'm not sure. A News Vegas in Las Vegas is reporting police local response to a report of a UFO crashing into someone's backyard. and they reported 8-foot being in beings. No, really? Maybe it's the fake alien invasion, brown-eyed girl. Somebody send me a video. At Stephen Cambion on Twitter, my DMs are open, or you can email me at truthseekershow@gmail.com. Chuck, I don't know what MUFON's statement is. You mean about this whistleblower? I don't think they made a statement about him. David Adair believes Bob Lazar. That blew my bubble. Yes, and Al Garay is here holding down the Twitch chat, and thank you for that. Says, I'm not holding my breath for evidence and proof. Right? Yeah. He's too young to really know the truth, says Jenny Lee. Yeah, 36 years old. Looks like a John Griffin progression photo sequence. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. You know why? Because I made them all the same size on the graphic first, and it just didn't look like I wanted it to look like history, like a line of history. And that's what we have here, because in pretty much chronological order, I put them: Bob Lazar, Phil Corso, Clifford Stone, Pete Peterson, Corey Goode, Lou Elizondo, and the newest guy. So I made the newest guy biggest. I like this thumbnail. It's simple, but it shows, and this is if you're just joining us, friends, this has been our brief history of UFO whistleblowers. We also shared with you some startling new information, I think, about the new so-called UFO whistleblower, Dave Grush. John Griffin, is there anything to deliver? No, I don't think so. Randy, 1979, says Grush is just another David Wilcock. Yeah. Archaic Revival says, good on you, Stephen. Many folks like me need the work you do. Keep on trucking. Well, we thank you for that. Can't stand Greer. He's a fraud. MUFON is done. Is MUFON finished? Really? Did they throw in the towel? No. I don't know. I haven't heard that they were finished. Do you mean that they're like, yeah. You got to be careful when you're making statements like that in the live. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that MUFON threw in the tail? No. Wreaking Havoc just says MUFON sucks. Yes, you're right, Brady Phillips. I'm not doing my job very effectively. So I'm supposed to remind you to I haven't been playing the bumpers. We have bumpers to remind people to do this. I'm supposed to remind you to like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos, because it really does help us here with the YouTube algorithm. Also, what I'm told by a YouTube expert really helps is that we have a huge warehouse here of previous live shows. Come back and watch one more. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation, we do things like this on every show. Sometimes we do interviews, investigatory pieces. Go watch one more. Maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow while you're driving, or going on a road trip, or cleaning, or working, or whatever. Watch one more. If you come back and watch one more, apparently YouTube turns the dials up and adds us to more people's feeds, and therefore we benefit. So that would really, really help. I also like to remind you that we are a viewer-supported show, and people like John Lies here all over the world has just sent $22.22 Canadian dollars. Says, keep pushing the con artists. Yeah, I think they have no place here. And imagine what a better situation we would have if all these grifters were gone, right? I thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. And so John Lies, longtime show supporter, thank you very much for your kindness. So people all over the world send us monetary support, And by the way, I do not exist off of the show. I don't pay my bills from the show. The money for the show goes in a separate account and is only used for show expenses, things like computers, microphones, software, whatever it is that we need, backdrops, lighting. It takes care of the show's expenses. And I am I have an attitude of gratitude, because people from all over the world want to see this show continue. They throw a few bucks in our hat, and you can do that by Super Chat. You can join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can become a YouTube channel member for $5 a month and get all the Patreon benefits, plus some extra YouTube goodies. Or you could just throw us money on PayPal. That's another great way to support the show. Essentially, we are a viewer-supported show, much like PBS. Growing up, my dad loved documentaries. He always threw money at PBS because he loved, especially war documentaries. I don't know why, but he loved war documentaries. And the only place back then to get good documentaries was PBS. So instead of holding a grubathon once a year, though, we just let people throw a couple bucks in our hat every time we're here live doing a show. But remember, you can also hit that super thanks button. Just hit the thanks button and you could throw a couple bucks in our hat, even if you're watching the replay. So that concludes my grubathon for tonight. But we thank all of you for your kindness, your generosity, and your support. Patty Wilhelm says, watch the Roswell programs. Yeah, we did a huge deep dive into Roswell. Rezo Factor. Well, it's not PBS, but it's the PBS model, a viewer-supported show. That's what we are. We use the viewer-supported show, viewer-supported model, like NPR does as well. I think Chase Davenport with the kind and generous $4.99 says, Johnny Boy Griffin, you've put a bad taste in the one show I listen to every time it comes on. So John, give it up, John. I'm not sure what that's about, but we thank you, Chase Davenport, for your kindness, generosity, and support. Chuck Bam says it's practically done. Yeah. What about the UFOs in the ancient paintings? I can't lie to you. Those are intriguing to me. But they can just as easily be stars that were stylized in a certain way that are being misconstrued for a modern day UFO. I find it strange and, it's kind of intriguing when you see that. Yeah. Especially because those paintings were made before the Wright brothers, before things flew in the sky, even before balloons in some cases. So what could they be depicting? Who knows? That's one of those enduring mysteries, right? Taxpayer says physics is physics. They just need laws. Very complicated. They can't back engineer the stuff because they can't understand it. Yeah, I have long thought that, taxpayer. The arrogant belief that we as humans can take a faster than light traveling spacecraft and just back engineer it is kind of arrogant and ridiculous to me. And I always equate it to, imagine if you handed an iPhone to a gorilla, right? Hand an iPhone to a gorilla and you say, look, we'll give you unlimited money. We want you to make another one of these. We'll give you unlimited money, all the time you need. Make us another iPhone, Mr. Gorilla. I don't think that we are yet advanced enough in our physics. They may have some, pardon the pun, completely alien form of physics that we're just not even able to comprehend with our puny monkey brains. I think it's very arrogant when people talk about back engineering alien spacecraft. What if they're so advanced we can't understand it at all? As taxpayer here says, it's a very, very good point. I completely and totally believe that. Humans says UFO talk and drama tonight. Now, I'm kind of staying out of the drama. I got my nose to the grindstone here, humans. We're trying to dig up new information on this guy and do some other stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. I love the story of Ezekiel's wheel. In fact, I have I don't think it's a painting. I think it's a print. I have a print of a painting somebody made of Ezekiel's wheel, and I have it in my office, Paul Thorne. I always thought that was a strange story. Now, some theologians will say that that's an angel. It's not a craft. It's actually an angel. And there is some evidence of that if you look into angelology, which is a strange thing to be looking into, but I find myself looking into demonology and angelology, trying to make sense of certain mysteries of the world, I guess. But Ezekiel's wheel is a great case, and it's one of those, it's another enduring mystery, right? Gorilla doesn't even know what a phone is. We can do it if it's real. Yeah, Mitch, you might be right. I mean, we might be able to. Like, let's say that the civilization that crashes here from an alien world is only 5,000 years ahead of us technologically. Maybe. But what if they're hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us technologically, millions of years ahead of us technologically? I don't think we'd have a clue, right? Genesis chapter 6 might shed some light. Yeah, actually, that's my favorite chapter of Genesis. I know exactly what you're referring to. Would be like back engineering the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, angel merch, angel mechs. Yes, yes. All right, humans. Good night. Yeah. Okay. The hieroglyphics airplane is two kings' names written on top of each other. Trust me, bro. Oh, you're talking about the Egyptian thing where it looks like a helicopter, an airplane, and a submarine? Yeah, I think that is not what people pretend it is. That's one of those layers of deception. And once you peel back the layer of deception, it makes a little more sense. Patty Wilhelm is here and says there's an old Italian painting of Madonna and Child with a huge UFO-looking object in the sky. I agree. I've seen it. Yeah. Yeah, that's a genuine mystery. Like, why is there flying saucers and pictures of Jesus? It doesn't make sense, right? Rezo Factor is here and says, no, it's just a different science used different energy principles. I mean, you know, anything is possible. When we get into could we or could we not back engineer an alien spacecraft, it's 100% speculative. We don't know. It depends on so many different data points and factors. How many years ahead of us are they in science? What kind of propulsion system are they using? What kind of material sciences are they using? I mean, for all we know, that there are civilizations advanced enough that they can build spacecraft out of beams of light and ride beams of light somehow. Like, we don't know. We don't know what technology a species that could be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or especially millions of years ahead of us technologically. So who knows? You know, that's when it gets into the speculation, and I try to keep speculative things to a minimum because it's like running in circles. You're never getting anywhere. Randy 1979 says, in Serbia, there is a church mural with tow ships with the pilots shown. Yeah, I've seen that as well, I think. I've seen that as well. I have a folder with all of those weird examples of things like that. Yeah. Oh, I think I've heard this story before. My mentor was a successor to Tesla. He taught me everything, and I've continued his work. Well, send me an email about that with some more information. It's truthseekershow@gmail.com. I'm interested in Tesla and Tesla technology for sure. And isn't it interesting that UFO people love Tesla and they love using Tesla to explain things like, oh, that was Tesla technology, not alien technology. How do you know? You know, who knows what that man? Different materials, science is required. Yeah, could be. Average age of sun-like stars in our galaxy is 750 million years older than us. Yeah. So they could be 700 million years ahead of us technologically. They could be. Minch Gaboo Ghoul says material science would be an issue, but we would be able to understand how it works. I don't know, right? I just don't know. Like I said, it's all speculative. Unknown sender, the tree of knowledge. Yes, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Yeah. I just heard a lecture from a priest who said that women were designed to be lesser than man. And I'm like, that's a good way to get murdered saying that, Father Dummy. Or what he was saying is that the curse of a woman is to be manipulative and try to control things, and that they should just be subservient to men. And I thought, that's a good way to get murdered, Father Dummy. You could tell that guy's not married saying something stupid like that. I don't know what world he's in. In my world, my wife is, she's the queen. What's up with common visions of people on hallucinogenic drugs? Imagination or tapping into another realm? Well, someday I'm going to document my own hallucinogenic experiences, including DMT, ayahuasca, and of course shrooms, a lot of shrooms, and LSD. It's been on my list of things to do. I have notes of what each of those experiences was like for me. And I did not see by the way, on DMT, I did not see the mechanical elves, but I saw a purple being, female in my case, and it was a surreal I'm trying. I struggle to even describe the experience right now. It was an incredibly surreal, mind-altering experience. That's what I'll just leave it at until I have time to do an actual proper sort of. I think people call those trip diaries, but I'm not sure. But I have notes from each one. Like after them, I made notes of what each of those was like. So someday we'll go the Psychonaut route and explore that inner space. It's something I'm interested in. But being a father of two now, I haven't done anything like that in years, and I may never again. You know, I just stick to the green. I have to be. I can't be that whacked out with children. You know, like maybe if I went on vacation without my children, or I was at the cabin without my children, I might consider doing something like that again, but probably not. I think my time with those things is over. I've seen Google image search once when I was looking for something similar. Adam's rib is a symbol of equality in scripture. I've heard that too, Patty. So this was a really old priest, and I think he was like old school, like women should obey men, right? I remember, Patty, when I was getting married, I said, are we going to go over our wedding veils to my wife? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't think you want to say love, honor, and obey, right? Because that's how vows used to, you know, oh, hell no, you know. Women actually, and that's amazing to me that to get married, women used to promise to love, honor, and obey their husbands. Must have been an easier time, though, for men to just be able to, you know, have a woman be submissive. Like, I mean, my wife's not nasty or anything, but she's anything but submissive, Patty. She's very in charge. Terrifies. I'm terrified. Send help. No. Did you see any blue chickens on ayahuasca? No. According to Genesis, we were created in the image of gods. Where did they get that from? Yeah, the Elohim. Yeah, I don't know. Adam recognized Eve as his equal. It could be. Yeah, I think it would be smart too. I consider my wife my equal. You know, like we get along that way. It screws up the chemicals in the brain that send signals. Please don't mess with it. You're a good guy. Yeah, I agree. You could go crazy forever if you take too much of that stuff. I'm just not as adventurous, right? It's like when you were younger. Remember when you were younger and you would go on like every roller coaster at an amusement park? Now I'm like, I don't know about that one. That one looks too big. Oh, it does loops. No, you know. Try Serbia church UFO painting, Patty. So people were talking about that. Parallax scrolling and extended perspective. Oh yeah, Mr. Ian, I didn't have time to finish those scrollers, so we're going to use them as soon as I have time to add the logos and the music, right? Yeah. So we have done our due diligence, friends, and this will conclude our broadcast week because I'm going to be going to the cabin early this week because my son's birthday party is Sunday, and I want to be here to help my wife and be here for that whole thing. So I'm leaving for the cabin tomorrow night. I'll be returning Saturday night, and we've got the party on Sunday. So the next show, I'm going to try to do one from the cabin. So, but I'll make an announcement. Please be sure to follow me on Twitter. It's at Stephen Cambion. We announce all the shows on Twitter. You can join our Discord. Please visit our website. It's truthseekershow.com. You can get all the latest episodes in both audio and video format right from our website, truthseekershow.com. Also in the description of the video is links to our merchandise store. That's another great way to support us, buy some swag, and support the show. So, boy, we've had a busy week here with this whole situation. I'm hopeful that a little bit of time off and some things will change, because sitting there on Twitter hitting refresh, waiting for new information about this guy, I got so annoyed I started finding my own new information. And I think that this guy's story is going to start falling apart slowly but surely in the next couple of weeks. That's my gut feeling. I could be wrong. In fact, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that guy's got the smoking gun proof of all the aliens, and there's a big press conference next week, and they announce, okay, we're going to show you the aliens, you know? That would make my day. That would make my year or my life. I've been down this rabbit hole for so long with nothing to show for it. So despite my cynical nature and criticism and being so skeptical, I still have a tiny bit of hope, right? A little part of me still hopes that this guy is not like the people around him. We'll just leave it at that. So we have done our due diligence, friends, for the week. We want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. We want to thank you, kind and generous benefactors, you Patreon supporters, you channel members, you Twitch subscribers, you super chatters, super sticker people, super thanks people, and of course, the PayPal pledgers. We want to thank all of you for your kindness, your generosity, and support. We want to thank our chat room moderators. We want to thank Spooky and Mr. Ian and all of you. What a great live chat that we've had. I can't wait to do this again, but I'm going to finish that cabin bathroom for sure this week. I've only got, let's see, I got to stain the floor, and then I got to varnish the floor and the walls, and then I just got little stuff like putting up towel racks, and I think I'm really going to finish it. So I'll post some pictures. Or we might have a celebratory cabin stream, not from the bathroom though, because that'd be kind of gross. But we may, as soon as I get it finished, a lot of you have asked about the bathroom. It's coming out great. It's just super slow, and I'm not a carpenter, so it takes me longer. But I will be there. And quite honestly, this week has been very hectic. My children are going to be home from school starting next week, so I need a little bit of cabin time. And I highly encourage you to get some cabin time, or whatever it is that you love and enjoy. Take some time and do it. You'll be glad you do, friends. So that's all we got for you, friends. Until next time, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.